Welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the Sarah Jane Adventure episode, Eye of the Gorgon, written by Phil Ford and is directed by Alice Troughton. This is the third story in the series, the second to be produced in its usual format of two part episodes, and this one there's not really much to talk about in terms of behind the scenes. It deals with one of the most cliched villains in all of sci-fi or in fiction in general. Nuns! Nuns are usually a shorthand for crazy religious people. Nuns have been used in many horror films and comedies as the evil, as an evil group of like almost cult-like to religions, and they're always usually depicted as evil mad women who are so dedicated to what they believe is right that they will harm and torture whenever. So it's Sarah Jane Adventures, and by extension, the Whoniverse's turn to play the evil nun trump card. But this story mainly focuses on Maria. Something which I haven't talked about in my last two videos is the prominence on Maria's family life and how much they heavily affect the stories. In the first two stories, Maria is basically moving in this new house with her father, and there is this relationship and this struggle they have with her parents getting divorced. However, there is this strange relationship there. It's not as cut and dry as it appears to be, which we'll talk about more when we talk about this episode. In terms of the general consensus, usually a lot of people are like, yeah, it's alright. They usually have a lot of fun with it. They have some fun with it, but overall it's considered by many to be kind of forgettable, kind of dull, but is quite less interesting for being the closest thing Sarah Jane has at the time to a horror-themed episode. Many elements of this story are similar to Doctor Who's own Tooth and Claw, in which a secret religious group are secretly worshipping a creature from mythology or supernatural. In here, it's of course the Gorgon from Greek mythology. For those of you who don't know, the Gorgon is a creature, a female creature, which when you look at her, you turn to stone. And the most famous Gorgon of all is, of course, the Medusa, which does get mentioned in here. And although we're not dealing with the Medusa, this is supposedly a close relative to that, implying that Medusa is real in the Doctor Who universe. Something which we have kind of seen before in the second Doctor story, The Mind Robber. However, that was a fictionalized version of the character, even within the Doctor Who universe, as that appeared in The Land of Fiction. But here it implies that Medusa is also a real-life entity in part of the Whoniverse's or N-Space's history. So that's all you've got to really know about this story before I delve into this. So essentially what happens at the start of it is that Clive is he's invited Sarah Jane to investigate this old people's home. Clive basically helps around there. Clive, of course, was introduced in the previous Sarah Jane Adventure story, Revenge of the Slavidine, and here basically establishes him as a main character. And right off the bat, he is established as the one who kind of thinks first, acts first, thinks about it later, and he has this very cocky attitude towards him. When Sarah Jane is basically talking to him about aging and how all this aging stuff will always happen will happen to us. Clive is like, oh no, when I'm older, when I'm in my 40s, technology will be so advanced that I could just put my brain in a robot and live forever. And he's so cocky and arrogant about it. And he basically serves, for the most part, as a bad influence character on Luke, Sarah Jane's adopted son. And that is his main role in the story so far in terms of the series. Really, there's nothing much here to it, although he does help him out, and there's clearly this bond between the two characters. Luke and Clive are characters that usually stick together. They're like a duo in a sense. They are the best buddies as Sarah Jane is looking after them all and basically being the mother characters, who essentially all of them, with Maria being the closest thing, I think, in the series to Sarah Jane's companion, as with Maria being the only other female character, it meant that Sarah Jane kind of has this particular relationship with Maria that gets developed in this story. Essentially, Luke learns from one of the elderly women in the nursing home that she is this mysterious figure who has dealt with things in the past, and she is hiding this amulet, and she basically tells Luke not to tell anybody. You've got to keep it secret. You've got to keep it hidden from me. And Luke, being kind of naive, because despite the fact that he's a genius, he's still incredibly naive, and so he kind of goes along with it, not even telling Sarah Jane, because he promised that he will not give away the secret that he's keeping this device. However, when they go back to the attic in Sarah Jane's house, Mr. Smith is like, do you know that Luke has brought an unidentified alien technology in the house? What? And stuff. The main thing that kicked this off is that in the pre-credit sequence, elderly women in this house are starting to see nuns appearing like a ghostly figure throughout the nursing home. And now this is really odd, because they make it out at the start that there is this ghostly figure, nun figure, that's been haunting around the nursing home, and we have this like figure going around. However, it turns out there's no ghosts in that regard. They just seem to be stalking people, but in earlier scenes they kind of appeared and then vanished, and there's this whole although the house is building this up, there's like women throughout the nursing home see this terrifying figure of a nun appearing in the building, which kind of feels like that's where the plot is going. But then it takes like a complete turn in terms of that narrative, and rewatching it, it's nothing that you notice when you first watch it. But when you rewatch it, you're like, that's kind of weird. Like, I don't know, like if it is the fact that these nuns are actually going around people's rooms and just staring at them for a bit, it's really odd, it's really strange. It's just a way to get Sarah Jane and the crew interacted into this story, which is kind of a criticism in terms of the plot. The plot isn't very thought out in certain scenes, in certain elements like this. However, back with Maria, because this is the story in which Maria's Maria's personal life, which has been a main focal point in the two previous Sarah Jane Adventure stories, but I hadn't mentioned them because there was a lot more interesting and much more intertwined with the plot elements. But here, this becomes part of the main focus in terms of her character, as we basically, throughout the three stories that has appeared so far, we kind of get this sense of this family that the parents are divorced, but this mother, she doesn't see the harm that she's doing. She just kind of comes and goes whenever she feels like. And the father figure, Alex, I believe his name is, Alex Jackson, he has this kind of, like, he's too nice to her to, like, chuck her out and be like, well, you don't bloody live here in this house. And the mother character just presumes that she can move in for a bit whilst her new boyfriend and her are having this little argument. And it's kind of, and Maria doesn't kind of see this for the moment. For most of her scenes when she sees her mother back in the house, she's excited, she hugs her and stuff. But here we do get this emotional grasp, which has been teased in the previous story, in which Maria's mother is just like, there's something not right with those Sarah Jane crew. Like, the last two times something strange and weird is happening, you were with Sarah Jane, and I don't like that. I don't think you hang around with Sarah Jane and that Luke boy isn't a good idea. She even at one point just is like, I hope you don't fancy that Luke boy, because he is just not right for you. And this, of course, upsets Maria to a extent to the point where she just shouts at her mother to get out of the room, and the father figure just comes down and is like, I can feel like, you're upset, what's the matter. Maria basically explains what's happened, and the father figure tries to explain, like, the situation, like, she is your mum, and she is your mum, so you've got to kind of listen to her. Sure, she's stupid, and sure, she's saying, but she's still your mum at the end of the day. And Maria just, like, bursts out. It's like, I wish she wasn't my mum. Look at you, Dad. You and her had these distant moments, these relationship issues, but you could just sign a paper, get a divorce, and you're no longer connected. But what about me? She will always be my mother, and I can't get away from her in that regard. And so she runs up to Sarah Jane's house, upset, and she slams the door, and Sarah Jane kind of is like, oi, there's some delicate equipment in you. She's like, oh, sorry. But Sarah Jane clearly sees Maria upset, and, like, Sarah Jane just automatically is like, right, we're going to investigate the house again. We're going to go back to the nursing home, discover what this woman knows about the amulet, and is it any dangerous and stuff. And Sarah Jane basically takes Maria with her, leaving the boys in the house. And the relationship here between Sarah Jane and Maria, my God, I think in terms of dialogue, there's nothing really here to write home about. It's your generic, see your character upset, the other one comforts them. Very nice stuff, but don't get me wrong. But in terms of dialogue, in terms of the progression, it's nothing right out. However, the performances, Elizabeth Sladen just has such a sweet personality that you can generally believe that it is Elizabeth Sladen who is comforting these children, and she just has this kind school teacher feeling about her. She's not the doctor. She's this perfectly understandable human being who, can understand these difficult relationships and difficult times, and understands that Maria just needs someone to listen to talk to. And also that means we get a lot of scenes where we got the two, basically the girl plot and the boy plot, which is a very interesting dynamic in terms of the Sarah Jane adventures. And I don't know, I just really like the pairing of Sarah Jane and Maria, maybe more so than Luke at this point. And they essentially just go up to meet this woman, and they start to originally think that like she's maybe some sort of crazy lady. However, she mentions the Sontarans, and the Sarah Jane's just like, wait, what? For any of you new series fans who might be confused by this, because Sarah Jane wasn't in The Poisonous Sky and the Sontaran Stratagem, in the classic series, Sarah Jane actually made her debut in the third Doctor story, The Time Warrior, in which she appeared alongside not only the third Doctor, but also making their debut, the Sontarans. We've talked about that story in a previous vlog, if you want to watch that. She's also seen twice, and she had another appearance with them in the fourth Doctor story, the Sontaran experiment. So she knows full well about these Sontarans, and she fully believes about this woman, I believe her name was Agnes, who is sadly suffering from dementia, and she is not in her clear mind. She forgets things, she kind of zones out, and she still thinks that she is this young girl, and she talks about like her husband as if like he's alive and they're gonna meet up in places, but not realizing that he's been dead for a few years now. And so there's this kind of sad feeling about the story, as it does deal with a character who suffers from dementia, which something which this is the third story in a supposedly child-friendly show at CBeebies, and we're tackling a character who has dementia. Now, you've got to be really careful with dealing stuff with this, because dementia is nothing to laugh about or trivialize. It's a real-life disease which just absolutely horrible, and it can torment anyone who not only suffers from it, but the families and loved ones of those that it affects. And so it's a lot more, you can't just like trivialize it. On that regard, I don't know, I'm not quite sure about the way this story handles it. It is kind of going part of the plot that they try and need to get information from her, but oh look, she's forgetful, she has dementia, and so our characters kind of like have to like make her remember, make her get this information kind of stuff, and I don't know how to feel about that. Sure, that's kind of a usual trope with character with memory loss like this, but the fact that they tie it in with a real life horrible diagnosis, and the fact that they put it in a children's show, basically implying that dementia isn't as bad as it's led out to believe, which, that's completely wrong. But however, it doesn't do anything truly harmful, I don't think. It's still treated with a sadness and a overwhelming felt of loss with this character. So I don't know. I think I personally don't have too much issue with it, but if somebody came up to me and said they don't like the story because of the way they handle dementia, the majority of the story, I believe it ends on a good note for it, but without the majority of the story in terms of how they tackle it, I can understand why somebody might not like this adventure. We haven't even talked about the silly Gorgon yet. It turns out there are a group of cult-like nuns who are worshipping this, apparently this Gorgon that has been alive for thousands upon thousands of years, and they need this amulet so that they can supposedly transport her back to her own planet, or at least that's what they tell Sarah Jane at one point. And they quickly discover that Luke has it. They've been spying on him, at least one of the women who runs the nursing home seemingly is working for them. And Luke showing like he's a bit naive because he's not that smart in terms of just social cues. The nuns basically are like, we just want to talk to you about this amulet, and Clive is just like, we don't have no amulet, but Luke kind of gives away. It's like, why, she wouldn't have told you that we had this amulet, and Clive is just like, shut up! And that's kind of like the buddy cop relationship between Clive and Luke. Luke is the strange one who has these unsociable quirks. He's basically the fish out of the water in their relationship. And Clive is the every guy. He's the guy that kind of tries to teach Luke how to be normal in a way that no other character in the series could. And this relationship, this bond, continues out through the entirety of the Sarah Jane adventures. But anyway, they tease something strange about this story is that there's a lot of not info dumping, but explaining about previous events. More specifically, when Agnes and her husband, I can't remember what her husband's name is, when they first encounter the Gorgon and this amulet, and that there used to be three, but then two of them died. One of them died in Syria when these two characters interacted with them, and now this is the final Gorgon who is going to get the revenge upon humanity and da-da-da-da-da. And it's really strange. It kind of feels like it's tying into a episode maybe of the classic series that we never got to see. At one point they even mentioned like the Yeti, so it kind of feels like this character might have even known the Doctor. I don't know. There's this feeling that there's just so much references to this previous event that it does kind of feel like a sequel to a story that we don't witness. And I kind of find that really interesting. Like, throughout the story, we're kind of learning this previous adventure through this. And yes, it's true that most of it then, it means that this story is hugely heavy on dialogue, and sometimes some characters feel like they talk a bit too much than what their personalities and what their role in the story should be. But it's still fascinating, and I love learning about what happened in this previous event. And this all culminates in the cliffhanger for part one, in which the Gorgons is taken to Sarah Jane's house as she basically makes a deal, believing that the amulet will set the Gorgon back to its own planet so that it can die with its own people. However, the Gorgon quickly betrays them and reveals its face to Maria's father when he appears in Sarah Jane's house, just trying to look for his daughter, and then gets turned into stone, leaving on a cliffhanger. For a kids show, that cliffhanger is awesome. The tension, the directing, the way the camera tilts as we see Alex, Maria's father, in this stone position, very weeping angel looking individual, and it also just helps push the story even further in terms of Maria's character. As part two, she is in this emotional distort. As the first part, she's basically having this argument with her mother about how, you know, her relationship with Sarah Jane and Luke could be considered weird, and she doesn't like that and feels like her mother's just criticising, not knowing, not understanding. But here, she kind of is like, what you've just done, if I didn't know you, if I wasn't a part of you, I wouldn't be here looking at my father who's turned to stone and is most likely dead at this point. You've basically ruined my life, Sarah Jane. And she has this breakdown. And Elizabeth Sladen's face, like, you can see that she does put all of this pain on herself, but she cannot allow this to distract her from the fact the world is about to end and Luke and Clive are in serious danger. And they talk to Mr. Smith, the computer, who basically describes that the process of him turning completely into stone is not complete. With the amulet, no, actually we don't learn that yet, sorry. The process can theoretically be reversed, however we don't know how. And Maria decides that she is going to go back to Agnes and try and find out information about her experience with the Gorgon and the amulet, and try and find out if there's any cure. Maybe she knows of a cure. As Sarah Jane goes back to the nuns' base, their establishment, to basically try and stop them. Now, I want to talk about the setting of this story, because it was filmed, the scenes which are the nuns' church, they're filmed in a specific place in Wales called McEdam Castle. And I've been there a few times. I've had very fond memories of that place. And knowing a little bit of history about that place just elevates this story for me personally, because it does help with that atmosphere of horror, as McEdam Castle is known for its spooky ghost stories. In fact, I have been there once on a ghost hunt, which was a lot of fun, I must admit. Did it with a bunch of people, so I don't know. I personally, I don't know about if I don't think I believe in ghosts in real life, but I just wanted to let you know that I have been in McEdam Castle ghost hunting there, so I'm kind of projecting my own memories into the story and helping it build this atmosphere of horror and tension as we're dealing with like monsters and the horror side of like the universe. So yeah, I find that a really interesting little, I don't know where I was going with that. But the more interesting element in this story, I feel like when we separate Sarah Jane and Maria in the story and their plot lines separate here, I do feel like Sarah Jane gets the weaker end of the stick here, as that their side of the story is kind of the villain. She is like, we tricked you all along. The Gorgon, the thing doesn't make a portal thing. It does make a portal, but it puts the Gorgons into our reality, and they need human hosts. It turns out the Gorgon that they have isn't actually, like, the Gorgon is actually a symbiotic creature that is attached to itself to this really old lady, and they basically plan on making Sarah Jane the first new Gorgon, this a much more younger Gorgon. And we get some really fun little moments of Luke discovering secret rooms and getting caught up again, and Luke and Clive and Sarah Jane having these nice little moments. But it's kind of dull, it's not that interesting, and it is kind of silly in certain scenes. Like, there's a bit where there's a chase scene and the nuns all circle around them as they just chant, I can't remember what they say. It's either like, be afraid of the Gorgon, or fear the Gorgon, as the characters are like, oh no, we're trapped. While nuns, these normal human nuns, surround them. It's kind of goofy, but it's the Sarah Jane adventures. But in terms of narrative, there's nothing really much there. But luckily, on the other side, we have Maria's plot and her basically having this interaction with this woman who was once an adventurer like her, until she took an arrow to the knee. Okay, I'm sorry, I had to make that joke. And Maria basically starts learning it's like, when we live in this way, we live in this environment of knowing about aliens and monsters and everybody else thinks you're crazy and insane. It can be kind of lonely. And she kind of, at this point, as she's struggling to get some information out from this Agnes character, she kind of realizes that she has been a bit harsh to Sarah Jane, and that she understands why for the majority of her life before they interacted, why Sarah Jane was doing this alone for so many years, because it's very dangerous and it's very isolating, and she kind of fears that this Agnes character being alone and everybody just thinking you're crazy and not listening to you, that's a fate that all of these characters in the Sarah Jane adventures are going to suffer from. And she kind of feels sorry and sympathetic on all of these characters, with Sarah Jane, the old lady, her father in a sense, in a way. And that's just a really interesting aspect, and Maria gets a lot of character development here, and she becomes a very interesting character here. This is really her story, her time to shine, as the woman she's talking to basically like remembers about the Gorgon and how she was actually turned into stone, but the amulet actually reversed the process. You need to get the amulet to reverse it, to reverse the stone effect on your father. And Maria's like, oh no, but the nuns have the amulet, and it's like, you've got to save her, but not just for your father, but for the whole world. Kind of putting a lot of stakes on a child there, but you kind of understand this is a kid show, and you know, kids are the superheroes. They can't be mentally insecure, because you know they're only young human beings. But it's a kind of a powerful message, and she also takes Agnes's mirror as you know, the story of the myth of the Medusa. In terms of how the story handles the Greek influences of the story, I feel like it does it very well. It does change a lot of it for the Hooniverse, and how a crazy woman with snake for hair, that's all exaggerated. But there's also some great moments in which characters discuss, and we learn a little bit about Greek mythology here. And I do kind of really like that. It's kind of like feeling like we're getting a interesting history lesson in certain scenes, but it's only for small moments, just enough that we, as an audience viewer, kind of understand. If you don't know about the real mythology of the Medusa and the Gorgons, then this is kind of like your gateway, your lesson in those, and that's really cool for someone who's a fan of Greek mythology, that they do actually tackle a bit, even if it's still fictionalized in this story, about the monsters from the real mythology. But anyway, the ending I feel is really weak, but it's kind of something. It's kind of like something that the writers kind of put their hands on. It's something which, because Gorgons are, you know, a very popular. I say very popular, but they are a recurring supernatural entity that appears throughout fiction, and they always have the issue of just a terrible ending. Most fiction that deals with Gorgons usually have like another threat afterhand, because the only way really to have a ending that kind of satisfies the themes and the plots and the ideas of the Gorgon, like everyone knows how this is going to happen. You know exactly how this story is going to end when you hear that the Medusa-like creature is the villain. I'm not even going to say it. you already know what it is, how this story ends, and how they defeat the monster. It's exactly, imagine what, just put that in your head, the idea, what you got in your head, that is it. I'm not even lying. I could read your mind right now. Go watch the story, and I bet you can predict the ending. Earlier on in the story, we had a scene in which Maria's mother goes into Sarah Jane's house, and she actually sees Alex turned into a statue, and we have this really funny moment in which she believes that Sarah Jane is obsessed with Alex, and that she couldn't have the real thing, so she made this statue, and Maria starts talking to him, and there's kind of this feeling that she still loves him, she still has feelings for him, but she feels like she messes up. She feels like that she as a person is the mess up, the failure in the family, and so we kind of get that hint here that that she still kind of has feelings for him, and then she escapes looking around for Maria and Sarah Jane. But of course, in the ending, they cure Alex. The man of the character is like, come with me, come into Sarah Jane's house. She's got a statue of you, and obviously because she didn't realise that it was the actual Alex, and Alex recovered, believing it was all sort of like a dream, does then the story ends on a very humorous note, as Maria is basically left the story with a huge admiration for the pains and suffering of all the adult characters and the loneliness that they can have. She's kind of matured throughout this story, and that's the end of the story. That is Eye of the Gorgon. Overall, there are some really great things to like about it. There's a few things not to like. Oh, I forgot to talk about what happens at the end with Agnes' character. Maria basically learns from Mr. Smith that the gauntlet has a property to reverse any effects that it harmed, that it caused. It's basically an on and off switch, and she basically comes up with this idea that they could use it on the Agnes character and cure her Alzheimer's, and Sarah Jane is just like, she's got Alzheimer's, it's different, it's not like that. But Maria's like, she saved my dad, theoretically, technically, so we deserve, she at least deserves us to give her a chance for it to work. And so they go to the nursing home, they give her the amulet, she puts it on, and she still suffers. But she has memories of her husband who tells her that she loves him, that he loves her, sorry. And Sarah Jane, and the story ends with Sarah Jane basically saying that it didn't cure her Alzheimer's, but it did do something. It gave her closure, as this technology was kind of haunting her throughout her life, but now it doesn't have that burden on her, or at least for the moment. And so there you go. That is the Sarah Jane Adventure episode, Eye of the Gorgon. Like I said, there's some bits really liked about it. There's some bits that are very weak. I feel that the main narrative itself, when the story's focused mainly on the plot of the Gorgon, the nuns, and all that, I feel like this story has something going for it. Like, it has the potential to have this atmosphere about it, this Sarah Jane doing a horror episode. However, it doesn't push itself too far, and it's kind of bland, forgettable, and basic. However, where this story is in its strengths is with the character of Maria, who becomes not only a big prominent role in this story, but she has this a lot of great scenes, a lot of great moments, and a lot of great character development in this one adventure. And she's basically pushed to her limits in terms of this this point in the narrative, and it is just overall just a great time. A great time with her, and she gets to learn these great moral lessons, and she kind of matures throughout the end of the story. So I recommend it. I say you might think it'll be okay. I doubt anybody's going to hate it, apart from, as I explained, the concept of doing an Alzheimer's story in this way, in a trivialized science fiction show like this. But with the exception of that, I think for the most part, a lot of people will think the story is okay, nothing to write home about. But there are some elements here which I think deserve to be seen, and Phil Ford is great at writing for the character of Maria. And there you go. That is Eye of the Gorgon. I personally recommend it. So join me next time when the Doctor and Donna find themselves in an Agatha Christie thriller with the woman herself, as there's a conspiracy revolving around giant, huge wasps. I am not even joking. That is an actual episode of Doctor Who. So join me next time for Unicorn and the Wasp, and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra.